Insightful analysis, bold comments, friendly debates. Find all that and more on Roundtable, where passion meets in-depth discussion and covers the hottest topics in China.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Roundtable, coming to you live from Beijing. Guess who I am? Guess who I am? Okay, I'm your old friend Man Ling, and I'm sitting in for He Yang because she has really important business to deal with, and good luck to her. And I'm joined by Huang Shan and Tony Reed. Both of them are my friends too, and yours. On today's program, a teacher quit his job after receiving the Beijing residence registration, or so-called hukou, and the school is asking him to pay 310,000 yuan as penalty for breaking the contract. Is it reasonable? Is a Beijing hukou so desirable? Tony, do you want one? Yes or no? No.
Well, you know.
And also on the menu, Roundtable's Heart-to-Heart segment, when we answer questions from listeners. If you have a question for us, please send an MP3 document to EasyFM Roundtable at foxmail.com. You can find us on Apple Podcast at Roundtable China. Rate and review us, please. But first, let's talk about the first topic. Now, every year, 240,000 students graduate from colleges and universities in Beijing alone. Yet, only fewer than 10,000 of them can obtain a local residence registration, or the so-called hukou. And however, lucky and so unlucky, how we define it, right? A young man who got the hukou because he took a job as a teacher in a Beijing middle school. And the school is located in Tongzhou, a suburban area in Beijing. But 1 year later, he quitted the job. And then, because he signed the contract, a contract of 7 years of service, right? And he was asked to compensate the school with 310,000 yuan. Number one is the violation of a contract is very solid, right? Evidence. But then where does the money come from? 310,000 yuan. Is that reasonable, we are asking? And is a Beijing hukou so desirable and valuable? So what happened?
So before we dive into whether a Beijing hukou is still very valuable, now we can take a look back on what actually happened in this case. And the young man who's surnamed Liang, Mr. Liang, he have graduated in August 2015, and he got a job as a physics teacher in a local middle school in Tongzhou district of Beijing, and which helped him obtain a local hukou. But as a requirement, he signed a 7-year contract with the school, and which will be valid until July the 31st, 2022. Yet he quit a job 1 year later because he believes he find another position with much higher salary. But this time, he ran out of his luck because the school took him first to the District Labor Dispute Arbitration Committee, asking Mr. Liang to pay the school 310,000 yuan in compensation. And to be more specific, this includes 110,000 for breach of the contract, 200,000 for introduction of talent. And the committee supported that. Liang didn't agree with the decision and filed a lawsuit at the district court, which supported the school's requirement last week. So by last Thursday night, the topic has already been viewed 30 million times on Sina Weibo with over 2,000 comments.
So just so that I heard this correctly, I just want to make sure, is it a 7-year contract? I mean, that's the longest employment contract I've ever heard of.
It's like a lifelong, right? It's like a permanent one.
It is. I've been an expat for about 5 years, and all of the contracts that I've been exposed to are 1 year or 2 years.
At most 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Usually.
So, wow, it's just, I can't imagine being joined to the hip, to a labor contract for that long. And, you're not really sure about the company culture and how amicable everything's going to be. So it just feels like it's a really, really big commitment.
But Huang Shan, a contract is a contract, don't you think so?
Yeah, I do believe
if you put your pen on that piece of paper, then you're going to honor that. That's my understanding of a contract.
And also, I think it's a norm in Beijing, especially for those fresh graduates, because if they want to obtain a Beijing hukou and they got the hukou from the employment with a company, then usually the company will ask you to sign a contract. But the term, the length of the contract depends different companies. Some company may ask you to sign a 5-year contract, but I think the minimum time would be 3 years, but usually it will be 5 to 7 years.
Government institutions used to sign you in for just 6 years.
Just 6 years.
Because they don't want you to abuse the system.
Yes.
Because hukou is still very valuable.
Yes.
And because it comes, when you get a hukou, it comes with it a lot of benefits. And then your life will become much, much easier. So let's see, what have we received on the comments online? I mean, who is saying what on the internet?
I think most netizens, they blame Mr. Liang for breaking the contract. Because some of the comments blamed him, saying it's so hard to get a Beijing hukou and the school helped him make it, and Mr. Liang should at least honor his contract. And also this will be on his own credit. It's like a black mark on your resume, like you quit a job, got a job just for the hukou.
But this one, I have a dispute because we are not sophisticated in credit system yet. So that's why he can venture or risk of having, doing such a thing. But if it's a sophisticated, well-built, we have a well-built sort of built credit system, I think Liang will reconsider his decision because it is he himself who signed the contract, right? And he knew at the very beginning it's a 7-year service contract. I wonder, I'm thinking about the money thing. So if the contract, within the contract, it's written clearly the how much or the amount of money that he's going to pay, then he should give up suing the school. But he didn't even bother, according to the story, he didn't even bother with the school to negotiate a compensation because at the very beginning, guess he is determined to leave maybe and temporarily use the system to get a hukou. Because hukou has, in this case, or in many of the cases, I really don't want to see the hukou, the status, a residence status has turned into a commodity. This is a bad thing. Commodities is for trading, right? Hukou is not something for you to trade with. Trade with your lifetime, trade with 7 years, or how much money you can buy it and sell it. No, it's not a commodity. So what else people are saying on the comment online?
I just have something to say here. I wonder if that clause was enunciated at the time when this individual signed the contract. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, in my experience with employment contracts, it's typically a mountain of documents that you have to sign, and it's very easy to sign a document and not read, the fine line. And I just can't imagine someone signing a document saying that if I leave the contract before the 7 years is up, then I'm going to have to pay this enormous, exorbitant amount of money. So I'm wondering if this was even brought up when this person was hired on, because I can't see someone just admitting or just being able to pay this amount of money.
So that means that this guy, Mr. Liang, didn't even realize what was the consequence actually, right? But he was told definitely that there will be consequences, when at the time when he signed the contract. So do you think the court decision is a reasonable one?
I do think it's very reasonable because he needs to pay for his behaviors. And maybe there's another possibility. Maybe he already predicted the outcome. Maybe he just did it for a trade, as you mentioned before. He think, maybe a hukou worth that much of money.
310,000. I don't know.
Some netizens said 310,000 is worth the for the luxurious product as a hukou.
Yeah.
Because if you even them out, you break them up, right? And then in the future 7 years or so, you need to earn some extra more to compensate whatever. But again, having seen people commenting on this matter like that, I was like, oh, no. People are, using it. Actually, people are abusing this system to get something they desperately want. And then you cannot sell, definitely, but you can buy. And once you get it, it's permanent, life permanent. So that's why there are experts out there who says that we need to make this hukou a non-permanent one. It's like a green card. The United States, in your country,
Right.
people started to abuse the green card system by forced marriages, by forced political asylums, by a lot of forced stuff, fake stuff.
Yeah,
right?
they're trying to use the loopholes.
But
of the
then
system.
after some sort of corrections, the policy has been changed in terms of, so far as I know. If you marry somebody for a green card, that one can only last for 2 years. And then if the marriage didn't work out, within that 2 years, then the green card will be taken back.
But I don't think that the person who would try to get a green card would be saddled with a lot of debt. And I just feel that this individual must have not known the repercussions of what he did, because I can't imagine anyone willingly walking into $310,000 or yuan of debt. It's just really difficult for me to grasp.
And we don't have a system there which says that, okay, I do not have money to pay for you, but can I give this hukou back to you?
Wow.
It's like in the green card, you can take it back, right?
Yeah.
Your qualification, you're disqualified, because you violated a contract.
Yeah.
But the system, the hukou system didn't work that way. Let's talk about the history of hukou a little bit. And hukou is very typically unique of Chinese system, and it is playing actually a very important role in the management of population. Imagine that back decades ago, even 4 decades ago, before China opened up and started economic reform, hukou is so important. You have because food was rationed, even cloths for making clothes were rationed. Everything's rationed, oil, eggs, everything.
Wow.
So you have a hukou. It's a small book where members of the family were written there, how old you were and how much food you should be assigned to, or subsidies, everything. So you were assigned to go to specific stores to buy your substance.
So you couldn't go to certain stores; you had to go to specific ones.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because that was in a planned economy. That was how the economy worked. And then if you travel to another place, you have to, whoever sends you, for example, you work for a factory, right? You have a business thing to do. And then you travel from Beijing to Shanghai. Then you need to present a letter of introduction.
Oh.
You then present it to the company you are dealing business with, and then they will receive you, give you the amount of food, accommodation, everything, and you were well taken care of. That time, during that era, hukou was so important. But as years, decades have passed, 4 decades, how important is hukou now?
I think the reason why the hukou is becoming more valuable is in line with the rapid development of urbanization in China. Because today we are talking about Beijing hukou, the capital city's hukou. Because so many people, they from second or third tier cities or some countryside, and they trying to find a work and settle down in Beijing. And the hukou is a very useful thing for them. It means the household registration status. And also with the hukou, you can enjoy several benefits. For example, you can buy a house, buy property here. You can join the lottery system to get a car.
Lottery system?
Yeah, to get a car license.
Get a fortune overnight.
Yes, because now it's not easy to own a car, actually. And also, you can enjoy the social insurance. And it's not only good for you, but also for the next generation. For example, your children, they can enjoy the education in Beijing. They can take part in the university entrance examination in Beijing, because we know if you take the Gaokao, the university entrance examination, in Beijing, you can use lower scores to get in better universities.
Oh, wow.
And also for your spouse. So maybe your spouse can also obtain a Beijing hukou. But I think now China is trying to tighten the regulation on how you can obtain a hukou. Because before, someone married for a Beijing hukou. But now the requirements are getting harsher because even your spouse has a Beijing hukou, but you need to wait until you're 45 years old, and also you have been involved in a marriage for over 10 years, then you are able to obtain a Beijing hukou.
You mentioned driver's license earlier.
Yeah.
Is this also about the license plate as well? Because I know some
Tony,
people who...
let me
It's actually the license plate, but as long as you get a license plate, then you can get a car. Without license plate, you can drive your car on the road.
Okay, it's all about control the expansion of the city.
Yes.
Because mega cities like Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and even Chongqing, they have too large a population already. And a large mega city has problem like pollution, traffic congestion, and a lot of problems we call the diseases of mega cities. But then people still continue pouring. Why? Because life is much easier. The good resources, everything, living standards are higher, salaries are higher also. But living costs are higher too. So they are just the twins, right? But the best thing about the mega cities is that we have a concentrated abundance in the best things, technology, education, medical care, everything. So, for example, these are not a must now. But before, as I said, compared to the past, if you don't have a hukou, there's no way for you to live, in the city. But now, a capable person, really talented person, can do without all these. For example, if you don't have a car yourself, because you don't have a hukou, right? You can rent a car, no problem. Right. And then property purchases, because Chinese people have a wrong think of that once I started my career, I need to buy a property. That's wrong, Tony. Have you bought a property? You're old enough to have several properties, right? According to Chinese parents and Chinese people. I have colleagues here, Lu Yuan, who's living happily in a rented sort of a property. No problem. It's not a must, right? And then, but there is something that people are really concerned about. For example, okay, if you have a kid and both of you don't have Beijing hukou, then some of the best schools are not available, not open to you.
But now there's another alternative.
But actually the city and the government are doing our local government and central governments, they are doing something to ease this problem, right?
And also if you are rich enough or your family
if you're rich enough.
school, you can send your kids to private school, international schools. It's a really good option.
But they're really expensive. I mean, a lot of international schools that I've been familiar with, you have to pay about $200,000 to $300,000 a year per kid.
So this hukou system actually is affecting the low-income people. It's not the high, like just now you mentioned. If you're rich enough, you can send your kids to international school, and then blah blah blah, and then you can go to some people who got sick, they go to even the United States to get treatment, right? So all these things is about Chinese government is thinking about if the hukou system is going to be reformed in a way that is greatly going to help the low-class people to get a better life. This is why, people are so concerned about it. Even in a matchmaking sort of thing, I been do research, people said, hey, you can have lower income, you don't have money, it doesn't matter. Even you're not, you're handsome or not, it doesn't matter, just tell me whether you have a hukou. But that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's actually wrong. And this Liang, come back to this Liang. Mr. Liang, and many Mr. Liangs out there. What shall we do if we don't have a hukou? How to live a happy life?
That's a really difficult question. There's a process that you would have to follow to go and get a hukou. But, and I now that I've heard the story, I feel that perhaps this way of maybe leaving the job early, I don't want to say it's a good idea because he has to pay a lot of money back, but I also feel that, perhaps if he didn't go this route, it would be really difficult to get one. It sounds similar to the green card in the U.S., and now it's becoming increasingly more difficult to get it, and some people have to take drastic measures to get one.
Yeah, indeed. It's the same thing, actually. How many years you can serve and what qualifications, whether you are well educated, you are the talent that the U.S. government wants. It's the same thing here, that we have a point. I think the mega cities like Shanghai and Beijing has introduced a point-based sort of system. And every year, only 6,000,
Oh, wow.
6,000 can be given hukou.
And not a lot.
Let me give you, I'm not very good at numbers. We actually 1/3 of the total permanent population living in Beijing has no hukou.
A third of the population.
A third of the population. So Liang would be acting clever at the beginning, He was looking for a shortcut to get a hukou. And he was not really like the 1/3 of the majority who were really working hard and trying to build up a career of his own. Because he's a teacher in physics, right?
Yeah.
He can definitely, if he focus on really good teaching. Because stories, there are reports out there says that he actually, the second year, he didn't commit himself anymore to the school's teaching. He was absent, and he was, looking for higher salary jobs. It's understandable for people to climb the salary ladders, I call it.
Salary ladder.
Yeah, indeed. I have a lot of co-hosts, quit, co-hosting with me, and then they just go, it's okay, it's legitimate. But then you have to you think about the consequences, what is waiting for you, right? And and then we talked about how difficult a person can get to this, and how many people are abusing this system. So, Huangshan, do you think there will be, or there are rooms for us to change the system? Because what went wrong is that Liang was no longer attracted to the school.
Yeah.
So the school was disappointing, right?
Yeah.
So in what way that we lose people we initially signed up with?
First, I think it totally depends on the employees, because we can try to reduce the loopholes in the system, but we can't stop people to taking advantage of the system. I think that's a really important thing. I think the reason why even he needed to pay such a great amount of compensation, most of the netizens are not sympathize with him, because he's not a professional teacher. If he's a very professional employee, then maybe people will share some sympathy for him. But as we see that after he decided to quit a job, he didn't show up at a school. That's a not very good attitude.
So his work ethics has a problem.
Yeah, and he even refused to negotiate with the school and talk to the school about his request and what he wants. He just stopped showing up at a school. I think that's not very professional behavior in a workplace.
Well, according to the report, it's a bit difficult to know the full circumstances. It's possible that maybe when this individual started working for this company, that
he was disappointed.
He was very disappointed. Perhaps some, payment was late on certain instances, or, his workload is a lot more than what was promised in the beginning. And, there's a lot of conditions on why people just leave a company. It's not just, so, and I agree that there's a hukou in the background of all of this, but I think that there's a lot more factors involved here. And, if you're unhappy with the place where you're working, obviously, in my experience, you give a 30-day notice, or you let the company know that you are not looking to sign the contract again, or you're leaving. And in this case, it's clear that he didn't do that. But I think it's a bit difficult to say that it's completely his fault, and that perhaps that the company or the school just perhaps didn't honor a few things, and maybe there was some friction beforehand. So maybe they saw this coming, but now that he actually is gone, they would like to come after him for money. And it's just really, again, it's really difficult for me to understand why someone would.
It's like a relationship actually went sour, and then both of them lost the attraction to each other, and then
Right.
you cannot blame just the one party for the wrongdoing.
There's definitely two factors here. So
And it's a sad story, actually, for a young man who just started his own career, and then he was burdened with such a penalty fee to pay with. And then I think if he agreed to go back to teach, will that be a solution to the school? Say, hey, I don't have this amount of money. Can I go back and then continue serving
I think
for another 7 years or
I
whatever?
think that bridge has been burned already.
Yeah.
And I
Burned! Oh, my
Yeah,
God.
he already burning the bridge.
So
my God.
I don't think that would be even an option. And I think the fact that he didn't even come back, I think there's a lot more to this puzzle that we don't have access to.
Yes, there are lessons to learn, so stay tuned. You're listening to Roundtable.
Informed opinion and heated debate. Find out what's got China talking and join us for your roundtable discussion.
Yes, it is us, the round table. I think the table is not round. It's a square one and triangular one anyway. But it's a table where we sit and talk about issues of our interest and issues that concern us. Coming up during the second half of our roundtable show, a U.S. study suggests a so-called loneliness epidemic, and young adults are perhaps the loneliest. Oh my goodness, it's a tongue twister. Loneliest of them all. And what gives rise to widespread loneliness? What impact will it have on society? And also, what about here in China? Are we lonely? And in our special segment called Roundtable's Heart to Heart, we will answer voice questions from our listeners. So stick around, everybody. We will be back after the break. There's no break, right? Okay. Now let's go directly into the second topic of the day. Tony, would you please introduce the topic?
Well, Americans have long worried that their countrymen are lonely, but recently, mild concern has given way to outright panic. In 2017, the former Surgeon General warned that loneliness in the U.S. has reached epidemic proportions, and that's not just Americans who are anxious. In January, Prime Minister of England appointed the country's first minister for loneliness.
Never heard
Wow.
of this before. Never heard of
Yes.
this before,
That's pretty
right?
cool.
I think we here in China, we also need to create such a position. We have one more minister, right?
Well, according to the Atlantic newspaper, a recent study suggests that the unnerving possibility that young adults may be the loneliest Americans of all. Explanations for this plague of loneliness abound, ranges from declining participation in organized social activities and religious organizations due to ubiquity of technology, such as social media, cell phones that suck up people's attention, according to a recent report by the healthcare company Cigna, where nearly half of adults in the U.S. reported sometimes or always feeling alone. So the prevalence of this loneliness seems to be especially acute among young people. One study last year found that Americans ages 21 to about 30 reported feeling lonely once or twice as many days as adults ranged from 50 to 70 years old, despite having larger social networks. So, and of course, the health consequences of loneliness can be severe. Studies suggest that chronic loneliness is linked to a variety of health issues, such as decreased immunity for infections, poor sleep, and cardiovascular issues. But I think the key here that a lot of policymakers are focusing on is the sagging marriage rates and the increasing number of Americans living alone. And
So we have several culprits here. Okay, number one. Number one, I think, is the singledom, right?
Yeah.
Sagging marriage, singledom because you're single. Number two is technology.
technology.
Even the mobile phones are taking away all our times for social life, right? All these things. And then number three is still marriage or whatever. But these are the two things. But don't you think being single is a lifestyle chosen by an individual? Instead, it's something, nobody forces it on you, right?
Well, that seems like it's taking a different toll with the government, at least. I guess there's supposed to be the Senate Committee on Aging convened a hearing last April about it, and also starting this September. Um, excuse me, September of 2020, school children across the UK will learn from their teachers on how to fend off loneliness. So this seems like it's something that's going to be implemented in school. So it's something that's the government is getting involved in. So it must be an issue. But I have to say, coming from the US, and growing up, I don't feel that there was I didn't feel a loneliness epidemic at all.
Let's look at the age of this, the range of age 21 to 30. Don't you think this is the best age in life that you're going all out to learn new knowledge, making friends with people, and use your curiosity into things to fulfill everything? I think this is the age range that should least be suffering from loneliness. What happened? What was wrong, actually?
I think you made a good point earlier about technology, even though I don't like to admit it. I think that a lot of people now, especially even my siblings, my younger siblings that are in their 20s now, they spend so much time on their phones. And I'll come home and visit from China, and they'll say hello to me for a couple of minutes, and then they just go into their phones. And then they just check out, and they're gone. And I think that this is causing some kind of issues with just communication, person-to-person communication. So I think that technology definitely has, a part in this quote-unquote loneliness epidemic.
This technology is misleading. We all think that we have found our old friends. They are coming back to us through WeChat or Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, everything, right? We were never lonely because instantly we can go get in touch with our loved ones and friends, but actually face-to-face, person-to-person meeting each other has been drastically reduced almost to none.
But I think there's a bit more to this equation. According to The Atlantic, in a recent study in which single women in their 30s and early 40s were asked to state their number one priority, and 44% it was living alone, while 20% said it was getting married. So I think that here we have just perhaps a shift in priorities. A lot of younger women are wanting to feel like they would like to live alone as opposed
independence.
to just independence is very important.
Indeed.
And I think that there's a shift.
Men are worried, right?
What's that? Men
are worried. Oh, you guys choose to live alone. How about us? And this is also because there's a worldwide sort of trend that marriage is no longer that important. That piece of license, that piece of because in agricultural world, especially we talk about it. Maybe in the old third industrial revolution world, you'd really need a couple to make a good living for the family. The husband went out to earn a living, and the wife took care of the kids or whatever. It's like a interdependent on each other so much. But now, with the help of technology, all the labor works, we have machines to do for us, and women are being liberated from all these dependence on men for physical strength. I can drive a car, a crane, something heavy. I can do a dangerous job with a robot. Myself, I can earn a decent living on my, for myself. And why should I go through marriage and then go through the childbirth pain? All these kind of sufferings. So, women are being liberated, and marriage is no longer as important as in the old age. So this perhaps is the reason. So we are choosing, but those people who have decidedly to choose a life to live on, I don't think they feel lonely. Who are the people who are feeling lonely?
Yeah, because I fit in the age group between 21 to 30 years old. I think to some extent I can understand why those people feel lonely. It's not only because they're single, it's because you imagine this age group from 21 years old is the first time you step into the society. Most of them are just newly graduated from university because society is a very different atmosphere. You need to deal with workplace politics, and you need to face new colleagues instead of your close friend. And I know in China and also in America, many people, they choose to work in a different city as their hometown. So they may be far away from their family, their close friends since childhood and high school. It's hard for them to build up a new social circle in a new city they adapted to. And also, I think for them, technology now become the main method for you to communicate with your friends and your family. Some people say technologies make our life easier and more convenient, but at the same time, it gives you less contact with your friends in the real world. So maybe people just feel more lonely in this virtual world. And also, many people may use marriage as a remedy to the loneliness. But if the marriage is not successful, it just turned into
double pain.
Yes, I totally agree that, because I remember I saw a picture which was quite popular some weeks ago. Some people just take a photo of a couple. They're sitting on a bed, but they just use their backs to facing each other. They just face different directions on a bed, and both of them had a phone in their hand. And a person just trying to use Photoshop to get rid of the phones in their hands and to check their facial expressions. Actually, they look very unhappy in the photo.
Yeah, indeed. Think about because you're the same age people from this 21 to 30, right? Okay. So don't you think from whatever just now you said, I have one point to make. So when was the time you feel the loneliest? When were you sick? When after work you went home and you didn't have things to do? Do you have videos to watch and books to read or whatever? What was the specific moment when you felt the loneliest? Oh my God.
I think there are some particular moments that I feel extremely lonely.
For example,
like when you're sick and when it's a festival. Like people are gathering together, but you are the only one who left alone in a house. And also when you face some obstacles in life, no matter in
pressure at workplace, right? Like you said, office politics, right?
Yes.
And then the fear of dealing with strangers and colleagues, all these sort of things. So this put me thinking, maybe instead of feeling lonely self-pity for young people, maybe consider acquiring social skills, to deal with all the pressures and try to go out and mingle with people and make friends with your colleagues.
Well, sometimes...
I think, Tony, when you arrived, and then I tried to help, although I'm not asking for any, but I'm ready to help. But there are people at workplaces who are ready
really nice
to help people. So, and then it's up to you whether you would walk or come out of your cocoon and to accept somebody's help.
Well, I think that's kind of where social media kind of takes from people in that aspect, where people in this age group spend so much time on their phones communicating to people this way, and that, like you mentioned, there are people who are open to communication and there are friends to be made everywhere if you have the skills. And I think that perhaps
better, right?
Right. In this age group, I feel that perhaps a lot of people may struggle with that, because since we are living in the tech age and everyone communicates via Facebook, or WeChat, excuse me, it's a bit difficult to acquire these skills at this point in your life. 25, 26, 30 years old, you're almost the person that you're going to be. So the idea of some of these institutions setting up some type of social education to teach children at a young age, it makes sense. And I support this notion.
And schools, and especially families, because we say families are the first school of any one of us, any individual. Yeah. So parents has this responsibility on their shoulder to prepare you and Huangshan to deal with pressure, to deal with hardships, and to, and then schools can do the same. As the loneliness, Minister of Loneliness or whatever, in Theresa May has appointed somebody as a lonely to deal with loneliness. I think to a certain extent I am for this move, because there are a lot of things that teachers can do, even starting from the kindergarten. The very first day when a kid left the family and goes into the society, and then if there are people, mentors, teachers, anyone, friends there to teach you how to deal with, teach you social skills. That would be. And by the way, there's another thing that, like you said just now, there are people who feel lonely and they're using marriage as a kind of makeup sort of a thing, but that is wrong, because I'm talking about those who willingly choose to stay alone, especially women, right? You choose to live by yourself, but then there are two sides of a coin. You enjoy the independence, the freedom, right? And then at the same time, when you were sick, nobody is, in the same room, right? To immediately help you. But if you have friends, and who is within a walking, just minutes, because we do not always, have such emergencies to deal with, right? But marriage means, if you decided to tie the knot with people, you lose your freedom and independence. And by the way, you have this responsibility, but sometimes you don't want the responsibility, right? And then there are so it's up to individuals actually to choose.
Right. And some people, once they get married, they tend to become more insular to other people. Meaning, like, when they get married, they pull away. Their responsibility and priorities are more towards their family, their husband and their children. And so they don't reach out to friends or even family so much anymore. So in a sense, they also become a bit lonely. So they were not able to interact with really anyone outside of their family, because when they do, other people have families as well. And so I don't think that marriage is necessarily the magic elixir for loneliness.
And also now many friends around me, especially female friends, even though they remain single, but it doesn't mean they're not in a very healthy and good relationship. They just enjoy the relationship and they just choose to get married when they are thinking about having a kid. So I think for them, they don't feel lonely because they are in a really, really healthy relationship. So they're independent, they enjoy the romance, and they're not single. They are single, but they are not lonely.
So this brings me to the idea of there being a loneliness epidemic. I'm not convinced. I just feel like, there's so many other things that are plaguing children in school, such as substance abuse, suicide, bullying.
Depression,
at least in the United States, there's a big issue with substance abuse, and so I feel that there should be a lot more litigation in this direction as opposed to loneliness. So it just kind of makes me feel like, what is is there some other implication? What are they trying to, why is this intervention so important as opposed to some of the other things that we're dealing with?
This put me thinking, sometimes marriage is and relationship is the same thing. You're not necessarily married, but you can enjoy a very good relationship. But if one spouse depends too much on the other, actually within the relationship, she became so vulnerable, or he could become very vulnerable because he couldn't afford to lose this guy, either divorce or by accidents of passing away or these things. So actually, in a relationship, a highly dependent relationship like a marriage, people are losing skills. People are losing social skills. They interact less with outside world. So this is actually, marriage sometimes is not to be blamed, I want to say. And then I think loneliness is a kind of feeling, a kind of void, emptiness in your heart or in your brain. It's not because I could feel lonely standing among crowds of people. So being alone and being lonely are two different things. So if one day you look into your own heart to find the so-called inner peace, then the more inner peace you have through meditation, through reading, through, learn to stay quietly, peacefully with yourself, maybe this will help you to kill this loneliness.
I have a different tangent on this issue, and it's just a personal feeling. I was reading on, The Economist, Washington Post, Huffington Post, and there is a huge demographic crisis that's going on in the U.S. and in Europe as well. And I think that this may be related in some way, because if you have a lot of young people not getting married and living alone, that doesn't really help the situation, especially with, birth rates plummeting all
negative,
over.
right?
So
Net.
I think that this initiative to, school kids and get them to be more familiar with relationships and be more social is probably an attempt to kind of get kids to get back on track with, boosting the birth rate up. I know it sounds a bit extreme, but according to the U.S. National Right to Life Committee, with a lot of people not having kids, its birth rates fell from 2.48 babies born per adult in 1970, and now it's about 1.8 per adult. And so you need to have two, kids, per person to replace the parents. And so the birth rate is getting so low that it's impossible to be reversed. So I think this is an issue that's going on, and I think that perhaps this may be a measure to hopefully counter that.
It's not only for the developed nations suffering from, the low sort of birth rate,
right?
And the net population growth is very low. And I think Japan, north sort of European countries are all suffering from these very serious problem. And then this problem is becoming sort of more serious here in China too. Shanghai has an aging population. Beijing, the same thing. And in the 60s, we witnessed the baby boom, and these people entering into their seniority, they need old age care facilities, and our industry of old age industry is not mature. So we are faced and then decreasing labor forces, the number of people who went in, and then China is not an immigration sort of a society. We are not. Yesterday I was maybe a piece of news from Japan. They are introducing new labor policies to attract people from outside of the country to contribute into this, to tackle this problem. All right, you're listening to Roundtable, and then it's time for us to talk about questions, answers, right? And let's see.
Heart to heart.
Yes.
You ask.
We answer.
Roundtable. Heart to heart.
Hello, dear presenters from Roundtable. My name is Alicia, and I have a question. People say that the difference between one person and another, career-wise, is how he spends his time after work. I work in a bank, and we're very busy during the day, and we work overtime all the time. So usually we get off work at around 7 or 8 p.m. We're supposed to do extra research and read extra articles after work, but usually I'm just too exhausted to do anything. On the one hand, I know that I'm supposed to work harder, do extra readings after work, but on the other, I just cannot resist the temptation of lying on bed. So, do you have any suggestions? What should I do? Thank you.
Wow.
Interesting. You guys? Yeah, Tony says, I have a tip. Okay, Tony.
Well, this sounds like a really rough situation, yet familiar. And I feel like a lot of people who start a new career, and I'm not sure how long this individual has been with this company, but for me, I feel like it would be a good idea at this point to perhaps ask a senior colleague, what they do and what works for them. Because a lot of times people that have been there for a while, they can identify with the feeling of being overworked or exhausted, and they could perhaps give a little bit of feedback on what they've done. And I think in that same discussion, you can, deduce from the response whether conditions will get easier as time goes by, or if things will remain constant, even though you gain more seniority. And I think this would be really helpful to, be able to gauge, the light at the end of your tunnel, and just to prepare yourself for how long you're going to need to work really hard. So, yeah, I think here it's really key to kind of talk to the people around you, especially people who have more experience and can give you a little bit more advice. And it would, I believe it would make you feel, well, it could alleviate some of the tension, and it could possibly give you some ideas on how to, well, to relax and if things are going to get easier.
Tony, I disagree with you, but I want to listen to, Huang Shan, your tips. Do you empathize with this lady?
I would like to say to Alicia, I share the same concerns with you because sometimes I feel super exhausted after work. But I know you need to enrich yourself. No matter how old you are, you should never lose the passion for learning. But sometimes it's too hard to keep your promise of reading a book, doing some extra research, and get rid of the temptation of your bed. But I don't think talking to your senior colleague is a good idea because it involves the workplace politics. I mean, if the senior is a really nice person, that will be fine.
Oh, no. That actually, seniors are always, no. Not every senior is.
Or some other colleagues who treat you like a potential threat for their promotion.
No.
Oh, wow.
My logic of not really talking to a senior is not an option is because even though it's senior or non-senior, they have their own ways to deal with their own pressure. So every individual is not the same.
Yeah. And I heard so many cases like people say, "Oh, just relax. I didn't do anything after work," but actually they did a lot of work after work. So yeah, it depends on you how
these are the not so honest people who cheating on each other. That's not.
I guess I've just been lucky every time I've gone into
Me too. I have never met such people.
Yeah.
Because you're honest with each other, and then you're treated honestly with each other.
Just like before examination, when you ask your classmates, do you prepare a text? I said, "Oh, I just went to bed at 9 p.m." But actually, they studied overnight.
My daughter came up to me with described such a situation, and I asked her, "Don't become such a person. If anyone come to ask you, speak the truth." So she grew up. Never really play such games or whatever, but that's the thing.
Yeah.
But just I have as a senior, I have some tips actually. Alicia, right? You think that the temptation of lying in bed is just irresistible, right? So don't resist it. Sleep.
Just follow your heart.
I am a hardworking. For example, the day before yesterday, I left the office at 12, and yesterday at 11:48. You can check my punch in and punch out machine. No problem. Why? But there's a precondition that you need to have enough sleep. You have to guarantee that you have a good rest and you are in a good physical and psychological and mental, health or well-being. Then reading, doing research, writing articles, not a big deal. Not a big deal because you are all vibrant. You are so you are full of vitality. This is one. The other thing is that why the workload is so heavy on you because either you are junior because you're not so experienced at your work because you were just graduated. Or if you're no longer junior, but you're still burdened down so much, but you ask yourself whether you're working, efficiently or not. So improve your efficiency in your job is very important.
And I think talking to a senior can help you with that.
Sometimes it doesn't matter about your senior or junior, but you have to finish the work.
All right,
beyond your limits.
That brings us to the end of today's Roundtable. If you're listening to our show on demand, please find us at Roundtable China on Apple Podcast. If you have a second and you are so inclined, leave us a review. It will help other folks find our show. See you. Bye-bye.